The dust swirled around Clara Whitmore's black boots as she stepped down from the stagecoach in Dust Creek, her gloved hands gripping a worn leather valise. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the ramshackle buildings lining the main street, casting sharp shadows that seemed to follow her every move. She could feel the eyes upon her, shopkeepers pausing in their doorways, women clutching their baskets tighter, men tipping their hats with expressions that held more curiosity than courtesy. The dangerous widow. She heard someone whisper from the general store's porch. The words carried on the dry wind like tumbleweeds, spreading from one wagging tongue to another. Clara kept her chin high, her morning dress rustling with each deliberate step toward the livery stable. 6 months had passed since Thomas's death, yet the whispers hadn't ceased. If anything, they'd grown louder, more venomous, like rattlesnakes coiled in the shadows. The livery stable stood at the edge of town, its weathered boards gray as old bones. Clara pushed through the doors, grateful for the dim coolness within. The smell of hay and horses enveloped her, a welcome change from the hostile air outside. "Help you, ma'am?" A grizzled old man emerged from the shadows, wiping his hands on a leather apron. "I need to hire a guard," Clara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "For a wagon journey to Wyoming territory." The old man's eyes narrowed. "That's rough country. Mrs. Whitmore. Ain't safe for a woman alone." So he knew who she was. Of course he did. In a town like Dust Creek, secrets were as rare as rain. "That's why I need a guard," she replied simply. He scratched his beard, considering. Might know someone. Caleb Rowe, former soldier. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's reliable. Camps out near Miller's Creek when he's not taking jobs. Clara nodded. "How do I find him?" "I can send word." "Where you staying?" "The boarding house on 3rd Street. The old man's expression softened slightly. "I'll have him come by tomorrow morning, if he's willing." Clara left a silver dollar on the wooden counter, more than necessary for the service. But she'd learned that generosity sometimes bought silence, if not respect. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Clara sat in the boarding house's sparse parlor, her hands folded over a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She'd dressed carefully, practical traveling clothes rather than morning black, though she knew it would fuel more gossip. Let them talk. She was leaving this place behind. The knock came at precisely 8 o'clock. Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house proprietor, answered with her usual sour expression. Clara heard low voices in the hallway, then footsteps approaching. The man who entered the parlor was not what she'd expected. Tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and a face marked by more than just time. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, pale against sun-weathered skin. His clothes were clean but worn. Cavalry pants, a cotton shirt, and a leather vest that had seen better days. He moved with the controlled grace of a man always ready for trouble. "Mrs. Whitmore." His voice was low, rough as sandpaper. "Mr. Rowe, thank you for coming." He didn't sit, though she gestured to a chair. His gray eyes assessed her with the same careful attention he might give to a stretch of dangerous trail. "Heard you need passage to Wyoming territory," he said. "Yes, I have a wagon loaded with supplies. I've purchased land near Fort Laramie. I intend to start fresh there. That's near 3 weeks of hard travel, through Indian territory, bandit country. Weather's turning unpredictable this time of year. I'm aware of the risks." He studied her for a long moment. "My rate's $2 a day, plus food, half up front." It was fair, even generous by frontier standards. Clara had expected him to charge more, given her circumstances. Perhaps he didn't know, or perhaps he simply didn't care. Agreed. "When can we leave?" "Day after tomorrow, if your wagon's ready. Need time to check the wheels, axles, supplies. Don't want to break down in the middle of nowhere." Clara nodded. "I'll have everything prepared." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Mrs. Whitmore, this journey, it ain't gonna be easy. Sure you wouldn't rather wait for a wagon train come spring?" "I've made my decision." "Mr. Rowe." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or understanding. Then he was gone, leaving only the echo of his boots on the wooden floor. Clara spent the next day finalizing preparations. She'd sold everything that wouldn't fit in the wagon. Thomas's fine furniture, the china her mother had given her, the jewelry he'd insisted she wear like shackles. All that remained were practical things: tools, fabric, seeds for planting, medical supplies, and the small fortune in gold coins sewn into the lining of her traveling cloak. The morning of departure came too slowly and too quickly, all at once. Clara arrived at the livery stable before dawn, finding Caleb already there, checking the horses' hooves by lantern light. He'd chosen 2 sturdy draft horses, nothing fancy, but built for endurance. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Good morning. Everything in order?" "Near enough." He straightened, wiping his hands on his pants. "You know how to handle a rifle?" "No." "Pistol?" "No." He disappeared into the stable and returned with a Colt .45, holding it out handle first. "Keep this close. We'll practice when we're clear of town." Clara took the weapon, surprised by its weight. "You think we'll need it?" "Hope not, but hope ain't something to bet your life on out here." They left Dust Creek as the sun painted the eastern sky pink and gold. Clara sat on the wagon seat, reins in hand, while Caleb rode alongside on a spotted mare. The town was just waking, shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, early risers heading to the wells. But even at this hour, people stopped to stare. They'd barely cleared the last buildings when a group of young men stumbled out of the saloon, still drunk from the night before. Clara recognized them, friends of Thomas, men who'd sat at her table and eaten her food while their eyes lingered too long on her face. "Well, well," one called out. His words slurred. "The Black Widow's leaving town, running off to find another husband to kill?" Clara's hands tightened on the reins, but she kept her eyes forward. "Maybe she's already found one." Another laughed, gesturing toward Caleb. "Hey, mister, better watch your back. That woman's got a taste for dead husbands." Caleb shifted in his saddle, his hand moving casually to rest near his holstered pistol. He didn't speak, didn't even look at them directly, but something in his posture made the men step back. "We ain't looking for trouble," the first man said, though his bravado had dimmed. "Just offering friendly advice." Caleb touched the brim of his hat, a gesture that somehow managed to be both polite and dismissive. Then he clicked his tongue, urging his horse forward. Clara followed, keeping her back straight despite the burning urge to look back. They traveled in silence for the first hour. The only sounds the creak of wagon wheels and the steady clop of hooves. The landscape gradually shifted from the scrubby outskirts of town to open prairie, endless grass rippling like a golden ocean. Finally, Caleb spoke. "Those men back there, they give you trouble before?" "They were friends of my late husband," Clara said carefully. "Some friends." She glanced at him, surprised by the dry comment. "You don't ask questions, Mr. Rowe." "Not my business to ask. My business is to get you to Wyoming territory alive." "Still, most people are curious about the dangerous widow." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "People say a lot of things. Doesn't make them true." It was the closest thing to kindness she'd heard from anyone in Dust Creek since Thomas died. Clara found herself blinking back unexpected tears. They made camp that first night near a small creek, far enough from town that the lights had long since vanished behind them. Caleb efficiently set up a simple campfire ring, bedrolls, the wagon positioned to block the worst of the wind. He worked without wasted motion, every action purposeful. "You'll sleep in the wagon," he said, spreading his own bedroll near the fire. "I'll keep watch." "All night?" "I'll doze some, light sleeper." Clara climbed into the wagon, arranging her blankets on the hard boards. Through the canvas, she could see his silhouette by the fire, rifle across his knees. She'd hired him as a guard. Nothing more. Yet somehow his quiet presence made her feel safer than she'd felt in years. The prairie night was full of sounds, coyotes calling in the distance, wind rustling the grass, the pop and crackle of the fire. Clara lay awake, thinking about the man outside. Scars on his face. More she'd glimpsed on his hands. Whatever war he'd survived had marked him deeply. Yet he moved through the world with a steady calm that suggested he'd made peace with his ghosts, or at least learned to live with them. She wondered if she would ever manage the same. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, a sea of tall grass bending beneath the relentless wind. 3 days out from Dust Creek, the landscape had become both monotonous and treacherous. The October sun blazed overhead, but Caleb warned that the nights would grow colder as they pushed further north. "See that ridge?" he said, pointing to a line of low hills ahead. "Good place to practice shooting. Sound won't carry back to any settlements." Clara nodded, though her stomach tightened at the thought. The Colt .45 sat heavy in the wagon beside her, still unfamiliar as a foreign language. They stopped in a natural hollow between 2 rises. Caleb set up a row of empty cans on a fallen log, then returned to where Clara stood uncertainly beside the wagon. "First thing," he said, taking the pistol and checking the chambers. "Always assume it's loaded, even when you know it ain't." He demonstrated the proper grip, how to sight down the barrel, the squeeze rather than pull of the trigger. His hands were scarred but steady, moving with practiced ease. When he handed the weapon back to Clara, their fingers brushed briefly. She noticed him pull back slightly, as if burned. "Now, feet apart, like this." He moved behind her, not touching but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Arms straight but not locked, both hands on the grip." Clara raised the pistol, surprised by how heavy it became with extended arms. "Breathe," he said quietly. "Don't fight the weapon. Work with it." She fired. The recoil jolted through her arms, and the shot went wide, kicking up dust 20 feet from the targets. Again! The second shot was worse, flying high over the cans. Frustration built in her chest. "I can't. You're thinking too much." Caleb moved closer, his hand hovering near her elbow. "May I?" She nodded, and he adjusted her stance with light touches, repositioning her arms. His breath was warm against her ear as he spoke. "See that can on the left? Don't look at the whole thing. Pick a spot, the label, maybe, make it small in your mind." Clara focused, trying to ignore his proximity, the cedar and leather scent of him, the steady presence that somehow made her feel both safer and more unsteady. She fired. The can spun off the log with a metallic ping. "Good," Caleb said, stepping back. The absence of his warmth left her oddly cold despite the sun. Again, they practiced for an hour, until her arms ached and her ears rang. She hit more cans than she missed by the end, though Caleb insisted she still had much to learn. "Out here, you might get 1 shot," he said, collecting the destroyed cans. "Maybe 2 if you're lucky. Has to count." As they prepared to continue their journey, Clara asked, "When did you learn?" "Young, 10, maybe 11. He secured the tailgate of the wagon. "Different world, back in Missouri before the war. Pa thought every boy should know how to shoot straight." It was the most he'd volunteered about himself since they'd met. Clara wanted to ask more, but sensed the door had already closed. They pushed on through increasingly rough terrain. The grass gave way to scrub brush and rocky soil that jarred the wagon with every bump. Caleb scouted ahead frequently, leaving Clara alone with the horses and her thoughts. She found herself watching for his return. The easy way he sat his horse, the constant vigilance in his posture. On the 5th day, trouble found them. Clara saw the dust cloud first, rising from the south like a brown ghost. Caleb had seen it too. He wheeled his mare around and galloped back to the wagon. "Company coming," he said tersely. 3 riders, maybe 4, coming fast. Indians? No, white men, which might be worse." He swung down from his horse, tying her to the wagon. "Can you handle the team if we need to run?" "Yes." "Good. Get that Colt ready, but don't show it unless I give the word." He checked his own weapons, the Army-issue revolver at his hip, the rifle in his saddle scabbard. His movements were calm, economical, but Clara saw the way his jaw tightened. The riders came on fast, whooping and hollering like men who'd been drinking courage from a bottle. They were rough-looking, with unkempt beards and clothes that hadn't seen washing in weeks. Clara recognized the type drifters who lived off whatever they could take from those weaker than themselves. "Well now," the lead rider called out, pulling up in a cloud of dust. "What have we here? Lady traveling with just one guard? That don't seem too safe." Caleb positioned himself between the riders and the wagon. "Afternoon. Gentlemen, something we can help you with?" "Friendly, ain't he?" The leader grinned at his companions, revealing teeth stained brown with tobacco. "We're just wondering if the lady might spare some supplies. Food, maybe, coffee. Been a long ride. Sorry, friend. We're running short ourselves." The man's grin widened. "That's so? Wagon looks pretty heavy for being short on supplies." The other riders spread out, trying to flank them. Clara's hand found the Colt, hidden in the folds of her skirt. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her face calm. "I said we can't help you." Caleb's voice had gone flat, dangerous. "Best if you move along." "Or what?" The leader leaned forward in his saddle. "One gun against 3 ain't good odds. Soldier boy." Everything happened fast. The leader went for his gun, but Caleb was faster. His first shot took the man in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. The second rider fired wild, the bullet whining past Clara's ear. She didn't think, just raised the Colt and squeezed the trigger. The man clutched his chest, a look of surprise on his face before he toppled backward. The third rider had circled behind. Clara heard Caleb curse, saw him pivot, but the angle was wrong. Without hesitation, she swung the pistol around and fired twice. The first shot missed. The second caught the rider in the side, and he slumped forward over his horse's neck before sliding to the ground. Then it was over. The leader groaned in the dirt, trying to crawl toward his fallen weapon. Caleb kicked it away, then knelt beside him. "You got 2 choices," he said quietly. "Ride out now, or stay here permanent. What's it going to be?" The man chose to ride, clutching his bleeding shoulder as he struggled onto his horse and fled south. The other 2 weren't going anywhere ever again. Clara stared at the body of the man she'd shot, blood soaked into the dusty ground, darker than she'd expected. Her hands shook violently, the gun falling from nerveless fingers. She'd killed someone, taken a life. The reality of it crashed over her like a cold wave. "Clara!" Caleb's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Clara, look at me." She couldn't. Her eyes were fixed on the spreading pool of blood, the slack face of a man who'd been breathing moments before. Her stomach heaved. Then Caleb's hands were on her shoulders, turning her away from the sight. "Don't look. Come on. Eyes on me." She met his gaze, surprised to find concern there instead of the cold distance she'd grown accustomed to. Her hands were covered in dirt and gunpowder residue. When had she fallen to her knees? "I killed him," she whispered. "You saved my life." Caleb pulled a canteen from the wagon, wetting his bandana. Gently, he cleaned her hands, wiping away the evidence of what she'd done. "That third one would have shot me in the back. You did what you had to do." "I've never—" Her voice broke. "I know." His touch was careful, almost tender, as he cleaned each finger. "First time's the hardest. But you're alive, and that's what matters." They looked at each other for a long moment. Something shifted between them, a recognition of shared survival, of lines crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Clara became aware of how close they were, his hand still holding hers, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in an unconsciously soothing gesture. Caleb seemed to realize it too. He released her hands, stepping back. "We need to move. That one who got away might bring friends." They left the bodies where they'd fallen. Harsh, but the frontier had its own laws. Caleb pushed them hard, wanting distance between them and the scene. As the sun set, they made camp in a cluster of cottonwoods near a small stream. Clara couldn't eat. She sat by the fire, staring into the flames while Caleb tended his own wounds, a graze on his arm she hadn't even noticed during the fight. "Let me help," she said, moving to sit beside him. "It's nothing. Please." She needed to do something with her hands, needed to feel useful instead of destructive. He nodded, allowing her to clean and bandage the wound. In the firelight, she could see other scars. Old ones, white lines crisscrossing his arms and chest where his shirt hung open. "The war?" she asked softly. Some from after." He watched her work, his expression unreadable. "You did good today." "I don't feel good. I feel—" She trailed off, unable to find words for the sick mixture of guilt and relief. "Alive," he finished. "You feel alive. That's natural, after something like that." Clara tied off the bandage, but didn't move away. The fire crackled between them and the vast darkness beyond. She was acutely aware of every point of contact, her knee against his, her fingers still resting on his arm. "Caleb," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something flare in his eyes. Heat, want, quickly suppressed. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. The air between them felt charged, electric with possibility. Then he stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "You should rest. Long day tomorrow." Clara watched him walk to the edge of the firelight, taking up his usual guard position. The moment had passed, but something fundamental had changed. The professional distance he'd maintained was cracking, and she wasn't sure either of them was ready for what might lie beneath. The days blurred together as they pushed deeper into the wilderness. Neither spoke of that night by the fire, but the awareness lingered between them like morning mist. Clara caught herself watching Caleb as he rode ahead, noting the way he tilted his head when listening to distant sounds, how his hands remained steady even when the trail grew treacherous. A week into their journey, they stopped to rest the horses beside a narrow creek. The autumn air had turned crisp, carrying the promise of winter. Clara knelt by the water to refill their canteens while Caleb watered the horses upstream. "You're different from what I expected," she said, breaking their comfortable silence. He glanced over, one eyebrow raised. "How so?" "Most men in your profession, they talk, boast about their exploits, their wars, their women." She capped the canteen, considering her words. "You don't. Nothing worth boasting about." He turned back to the horses, but not before she caught something raw flash across his face. That evening, as they sat by their small fire, Clara found herself pressing further. "You mentioned Missouri. Is that where you're from?" Caleb poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Farm outside Independence, youngest of 3 boys. Do you ever go back?" "Nothing to go back to." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "Farm's gone. Family too, mostly." "The war?" He nodded slowly. "Lost my oldest brother at Wilson's Creek, middle brother at Shiloh." He paused, staring into the flames. "Last one. That was my fault." Clara waited, sensing the weight of untold story. Sam. The name came out rough, unused. He was 17 when he enlisted. I was his sergeant. Promised Ma I'd keep him safe. Caleb's hands clenched and unclenched. "Battle of Franklin. November '64. Ordered him to hold a position I knew couldn't be held. Watched him die for a piece of ground we abandoned an hour later." The confession hung between them, heavy as smoke. Clara moved without thinking. Placing her hand over his, he flinched but didn't pull away. "It wasn't your fault," she said softly. "Tell that to him." He turned his hand palm up, fingers briefly interlacing with hers before he pulled away. "What about you? What are you running from?" The sudden redirect caught her off guard. "I'm not running. I'm starting over." "Same thing, sometimes." Clara drew her shawl tighter, though the chill she felt wasn't from the air. "My husband, Thomas, he was wealthy, respected. Everyone thought I was fortunate to marry so well above my station. But," she'd never spoken these words aloud, not to anyone. "He was cruel, not always with his fists, though that too he enjoyed. controlling things, making me small. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I lost a baby because of him, his temper, his hands. The doctor said it was an accident, a fall down the stairs, but Thomas had pushed me. Caleb went very still. When she risked a glance at him, his jaw was rigid, eyes hard as flint. The night he died. She continued, needing to finish now she'd started. He'd been drinking, more than usual. He came at me with a fireplace poker. I dodged, and he hit his head on the marble mantel. The doctor said it was apoplexy, but people whispered. They knew what kind of man he was, but somehow that made it worse. A woman who'd drive her husband to such extremes. He's dead and you're alive, Caleb said quietly. That's justice enough. Clara looked at him in surprise. No judgment in his voice. No questions about what she might have done in those final moments. Just acceptance. You're the first person to touch me without making me flinch, she admitted. Even helping with your wound that night. I waited for you to grab too hard, to demand something. I won't. The words were a promise, solemn as an oath. Ever. They sat in silence as the fire burned low. Finally, Clara rose to retreat to the wagon. As she passed him, she briefly touched his shoulder. Thank you for listening. He caught her hand, holding it gently. Clara, he seemed to struggle with words. You're stronger than you know. Don't let anyone, including me, tell you different. 2 days later, they faced their first real weather. The storm rolled in from the northwest, a wall of sand and dust that turned day to twilight. Caleb spotted it coming and quickly steered them toward a cluster of rocks he'd noticed earlier. Help me with the canvas, he shouted over the rising wind. Together they fought to secure extra covers over the wagon. The wind tried to tear the fabric from their hands, and grit stung every exposed inch of skin. By the time they finished, visibility had dropped to mere feet. There, Caleb pointed through the swirling dust. Cave in those rocks. Not deep, but better than nothing. They unhitched the horses, leading them to shelter. The cave was little more than a deep overhang, perhaps 8 feet deep and 12 wide, barely enough room for the horses at one end and 2 people at the other. As the storm raged outside, they huddled against the back wall. The temperature had plummeted, and even with their coats and blankets, the cold bit deep. Clara couldn't stop shivering. Come here, Caleb said, opening his coat. She hesitated. Just sharing warmth, he assured her. Nothing more. Clara moved closer, letting him wrap his coat around both of them. The intimacy was overwhelming. His solid warmth, the steady beat of his heart, the way his arms carefully encircled her without presuming. She hadn't been held like this, protective, gentle, in longer than she could remember. Better? His voice rumbled through his chest. Yes. She relaxed incrementally, her cheek coming to rest against his shoulder. They fit together easily, naturally, like puzzle pieces finding their match. Tell me about Wyoming, he said. This land you bought. Clara closed her eyes, picturing it. 60 acres along the Sweetwater River. The previous owner's widow sold it cheap, wanting to return east. There's a partial cabin, good soil, mountains in the distance. She smiled against his shirt. I'm going to build a trading post, maybe a small inn eventually. Somewhere travelers can rest, resupply. Somewhere people can start over without judgment. Sounds nice. You could stay. The words escaped before she could stop them. I mean, I'll need help building, getting established, if you're not committed elsewhere. His arms tightened almost imperceptibly around her. I'm not much for settling down. No, of course. Embarrassment heated her cheeks. I didn't mean to presume. Clara. He shifted so he could see her face. It ain't about you. I've been drifting since the war ended. Don't know how to do anything else anymore. She studied his face in the dim light. Maybe you just haven't found a reason to stop drifting. Their eyes met and held. The storm howled outside, but in their small shelter, everything went still. Caleb's hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away grit from the storm. You make me want things I've got no right to want, he said roughly. What things? Instead of answering, he leaned down and kissed her. It was careful, almost hesitant, as if he expected her to pull away. Clara's breath caught. His lips were chapped from the sun, but gentle, questioning. She answered by pressing closer, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and loss pouring into this moment of connection. When they finally parted, both were breathing unsteadily. "Clara, She silenced him with another kiss, shorter but no less meaningful. "Don't apologize, please." They spent the rest of the storm wrapped in each other's arms, not speaking, not pushing for more than this fragile closeness. Clara dozed fitfully, waking periodically to make sure it wasn't a dream. Each time, Caleb's arms tightened reassuringly around her. When morning came and the storm had passed, they extracted themselves awkwardly. Neither spoke of the night as they dug out the wagon and continued on their way. But something fundamental had shifted. The careful distance Caleb had maintained was gone, replaced by stolen glances and hands that lingered when helping her from the wagon. That evening, as they made camp under clearing skies, Clara confronted what hung between them. "Are we going to pretend last night didn't happen?" Caleb paused in building the fire. "What do you want, Clara?" "I want to know what you meant. About wanting things you have no right to?" He added, kindling slowly. "Precisely. You're a lady, educated, refined. You deserve better than a broken-down soldier who can't offer anything but a gun and a bad temper." Clara moved to kneel beside him. "I'm a widow with a scandalous reputation, starting over with nothing but determination and stubbornness. And you're the first person to make me feel safe, to make me feel anything good. You're paying me to protect you. That makes this, what, complicated?" She touched his scarred hand. "Everything about my life is complicated. Caleb, that doesn't mean it's wrong." He turned his hand to grasp hers. "When we reach Wyoming, when you're safe on your land, then we can see what this is, if it's real or just trail loneliness." It wasn't what she wanted to hear, but she understood his caution. They'd both been broken by life, careful now with whatever remained of their hearts. "All right," she agreed. "When we reach Wyoming." But as they sat by the fire, closer now than propriety allowed, Clara knew the answer already. This thing between them, unexpected, fragile, but growing stronger with each passing mile, was as real as the dangers they faced, as real as the hope she carried for a different future, one that might have room for a scarred soldier who kissed her like she was precious and held her like he'd never let go. The morning after their conversation by the fire, Clara woke to find frost coating the wagon canvas. Winter was approaching faster than expected. She emerged to find Caleb already up, coffee brewing over the fire. He handed her a cup without meeting her eyes. The awkwardness between them was palpable, a living thing that rode alongside them as they continued west. They were excessively polite, careful not to touch even accidentally. It was worse than the cold distance of before. Now they both knew what lay beneath the surface, and the effort to contain it was exhausting. 3 days passed this way. On the 4th, Clara had endured enough. "This is ridiculous," she announced, pulling the horses to a stop in the middle of nowhere. Caleb wheeled his mare around. "Something wrong with the wagon?" "Yes, its driver is being treated like she has the pox by her guide." She set the brake with more force than necessary. "We kissed, Caleb. We held each other through a storm. Now you can barely look at me." He dismounted, approaching slowly. "I'm trying to do right by you. By pretending I don't exist. By not taking advantage." He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You've been through enough without me adding to it." Clara climbed down from the wagon to face him. "What if I want you to add to it? What if I'm tired of being treated like something fragile?" "You are fragile." The words came out harsh. "You flinch when men get too close. You have nightmares. Yes, I've heard them. You think I don't see how you check where I am before you relax? You're healing, Clara, and I won't be another man who—" She stepped forward and kissed him, cutting off his words. It wasn't gentle like before. It was frustrated, demanding, full of all the longing she'd been suppressing. When she pulled back, he looked stunned, I'm not made of glass, she said firmly. Yes, I have scars. So do you, but I know the difference between a man who hurts and one who protects. Don't you dare put yourself in the same category as him. Caleb caught her face between his hands, searching her eyes. What he found there must have broken through his resistance, because he kissed her back with a hunger that made her knees weak. His arms came around her, lifting her against him, and she felt the control he'd been maintaining shatter. When they parted, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. You're going to be the death of me. Woman. I certainly hope not. I've had enough of dead men. The unexpected dark humor startled a laugh from him. The first real laugh she'd heard from Caleb Rowe. It transformed his face, easing lines of hardship and making him look younger. There, she said softly. That's better. They continued their journey with a new ease between them. Not quite lovers, but more than guide and client. Sometimes Caleb rode beside the wagon instead of ahead. And they talked, about inconsequential things mostly, but sometimes about dreams they'd thought long buried. That night, as they made camp near a grove of cottonwoods, Clara noticed Caleb favoring his left side. You're hurt, she said. From those men? It's nothing. Old injury acting up. Let me see. He hesitated, then slowly removed his shirt. In the firelight, she could see the full map of violence written on his skin, but it was the fresh bruising along his ribs that concerned her. They're horses, he admitted. One kicked me during the fight. Didn't want to worry you. Clara retrieved her medical supplies from the wagon. Sit. She cleaned the area gently, feeling him tense under her touch. Not from pain, she realized, but from the intimacy of it. Her fingers traced older scars as she worked. Shrapnel, he said, indicating a starburst pattern near his shoulder. Saber, for a long line across his ribs. Musket ball, for a puckered mark on his side. So much damage, she murmured. Still here, aren't I? She looked up to find him watching her intently. The firelight danced in his gray eyes, and something electric passed between them. Clara's hands stilled on his chest. Clara, he said, voice low and rough. You should go back to the wagon. Why? Because if you don't, I'm going to do something we agreed to wait on. Instead of moving away, she leaned closer. What if I don't want to wait? His control snapped. He pulled her onto his lap, kissing her deeply. Clara responded with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair. She could feel his heart racing under her palm, matching her own wild rhythm. Are you sure? He asked against her lips. Yes, she breathed. I'm sure. What followed was unlike anything in her experience. Where Thomas had taken, Caleb gave. Where there had been force, now there was patience. He touched her like she was something precious, worth reverence. When old fears tried to surface, he sensed it, gentling his touch and murmuring reassurances. They made love slowly, carefully, with the vast prairie as their only witness. It was an act of healing as much as passion, two damaged souls finding solace in each other. Afterward, they lay entwined under the blankets, Clara's head on Caleb's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. I didn't know it could be like that, she admitted quietly. His arms tightened around her. Like what? Gentle, mutual, something I wanted too. Caleb pressed a kiss to her hair. It should always be something you want too. They dozed fitfully, waking periodically to touch and reassure themselves this was real. Near dawn, Clara stirred to find Caleb watching the stars, his expression thoughtful. Regrets? She asked, suddenly fearful. He looked down at her, smoothing hair back from her face. No, just thinking. About? About how I've been drifting for 5 years, looking for a place to stop. Never thought it might be a person instead of a place. Clara's heart swelled. Caleb. I'm not good with words. Clara. But you need to know, this isn't just trail loneliness for me. When we reach your land, I'm not riding on, not unless you send me away. I won't, she promised. I want you to stay, not as a hired guard, as, Whatever you want to be. How about we start with partner and see where it goes?" She smiled. "I'd like that." As the sun rose, painting the prairie in shades of gold and pink, they broke camp with a new understanding between them. They were no longer two isolated souls making a business journey. They were partners, lovers, two people building something together. The trail ahead remained dangerous. They still had Indian territory to cross, rivers to ford, weather to endure. But now they faced it truly together, and somehow that made all the difference. Late that afternoon, as they navigated a particularly treacherous stretch of rocky ground, Caleb suddenly held up his hand. Clara stopped the team, instantly alert. "Riders," he said quietly, "coming fast from the northeast." Clara reached for the rifle, but Caleb shook his head. "Too many, 8, maybe 10. We can't fight that many. What do we do?" He scanned the terrain, his tactical mind working. "Those rocks there, we might be able to—" The riders crested the hill before they could move. Clara's blood ran cold. She recognized the lead rider, Marcus Whitmore, Thomas's younger brother. He'd found her. Well, Marcus called out as his group surrounded them. "Sister dear, you've led us quite a chase. I'm not your sister anymore," Clara said, proud when her voice didn't shake. "No, the family disagrees. You see, there are questions about Thomas's death, questions that need answering back in Missouri." His smile was cold, predatory. "And there's the matter of certain valuable items that seem to have gone missing from the estate. Everything I took was mine by rights. The law might see it differently." Marcus's eyes shifted to Caleb. "Who's this? Your accomplice?" "Hired guide," Caleb said evenly. "Nothing more." "Is that so?" Marcus studied them both, and Clara knew he saw more than they intended. "Well then, you won't mind if we escort Mrs. Whitmore back to face justice. I'm sure you can find your way back to wherever you came from." "Can't do that," Caleb said. "Oh, and why's that?" "Because I gave my word to see her safely to Wyoming. I intend to keep it." Marcus laughed. "Noble, stupid, but noble." He drew his pistol, not quite pointing it at anyone yet. "Here's what's going to happen. Clara comes with us. You ride on. Everyone lives." "No." Clara straightened in the wagon seat. "I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Caleb said quietly. His hand rested casually near his gun. "Question is whether you're prepared for the consequences of yours." The tension stretched taut. 8 guns against 2. The odds were impossible, but Clara saw the calculation in Caleb's eyes. He was figuring angles, weighing options, preparing to die, protecting her. "I know what you're thinking," she said suddenly to Marcus. "You're thinking about the money Thomas hid, the gold he skimmed from the army contracts." Marcus went still. "What gold? Did you really think I didn't know? That he could beat me every night and I wouldn't listen at doors, read his correspondence when he was drunk?" She laughed bitterly. "I know where it is. Marcus, all of it. Come with us to Wyoming, and I'll tell you, try to take me by force, and you'll never find it." It was a desperate gamble, but she saw greed war with suspicion in his eyes. The other men shifted restlessly, also interested now. "You're lying," Marcus said, but uncertainty colored his voice. 30,000 in gold eagles, Clara said calmly, hidden in 3 separate caches between Independence and Fort Kearny. I have the locations memorized. "Hurt either of us, and they die with me." Marcus holstered his gun slowly. "All right, sister. We'll play it your way. For now." He gestured to his men. "We'll be your escort to Wyoming. Make sure you arrive safely. Then we'll discuss this gold." As the enlarged party moved on, Caleb brought his horse close to the wagon. "Is there really gold?" he asked quietly. "Oh, yes," Clara said, "but not where I'll tell them. Thomas thought I was too stupid to understand his schemes. He was wrong about many things." Caleb studied her with something like admiration. "You are full of surprises, Clara Whitmore. Good ones, I hope. The best kind," he assured her, but his eyes remained watchful on the riders around them. They'd bought time, nothing more. The real confrontation was still to come. The frontier town of Millbrook appeared on the horizon like a mirage after 2 days of traveling under Marcus Whitmore's watchful eye. The forced escort had turned every mile into a test of nerves, with Marcus's men circling them like vultures waiting for weakness. "We'll resupply here," Marcus announced as they entered the dusty main street. "Sister dear, you'll come with me to the general store. Mr. Rowe can tend to the horses." Caleb's jaw tightened, but Clara touched his arm lightly. "It's all right. I need some supplies anyway." She could see he wanted to protest, but they both knew any show of their real relationship would put them in greater danger. As she climbed down from the wagon, Caleb helped her with studied professionalism, though his fingers pressed a warning against her waist. The general store was dim and cramped, smelling of leather and coffee beans. Marcus stayed close as Clara gathered basic supplies, his presence oppressive as a storm cloud. "You've changed," he observed, watching her select ammunition with practiced ease. "The timid mouse Thomas married would have fainted at the sight of bullets. People change when they have to." "Indeed. Thomas wrote me about your difficulties, said you were becoming willful, disobedient." His voice dropped. "He asked my advice on handling you." Clara's hands stilled on a bolt of cloth. "And what did you tell him?" "That a firm hand was needed, that women, like horses, require breaking." He moved closer, and Clara smelled the same cologne Thomas had worn. Her stomach churned. Perhaps he wasn't firm enough. The store bell chimed. Clara turned to see a stranger entering, a thin man in a travel-worn suit, dust covering his spectacles. He looked like an Eastern clerk, lost in the wilderness. "Pardon me," the man said nervously. "I'm looking for Mrs. Clara Whitmore." Both Clara and Marcus turned sharply. "I'm Mrs. Whitmore," Clara said carefully. The man brightened. "Excellent. I'm Henry Farworth, attorney at law. I've been searching for you for weeks." He fumbled in his coat pocket, producing a thick envelope. "I represent your late aunt, Mrs. Dorothy Sinclair of Boston." Clara's mind raced. She had no aunt in Boston, late or otherwise. "I think you're mistaken." "No mistake, madam. Your mother's sister? She passed 3 months ago and named you in her will." He glanced at Marcus. "Quite a substantial inheritance. I'm pleased to say the estate is eager to settle matters." Marcus's eyes gleamed with fresh greed. "How substantial?" Mr. Farworth clutched his papers protectively. "I'm only authorized to discuss details with Mrs. Whitmore privately, if possible. I'm her brother-in-law, her nearest male relative. Be that as it may, the will specifically names Mrs. Clara Whitmore, née Sinclair. Massachusetts law is quite clear on the matter." Clara caught on to the game, though she couldn't fathom who was playing it. "Of course, Aunt Dorothy. I was saddened to hear of her passing. Mr. Farworth, perhaps we could speak at the hotel?" "Certainly. Madam, I have a room there." Marcus grabbed Clara's arm as they left the store. "You didn't mention any aunt. You didn't ask." She pulled free. "Dead relatives weren't relevant to our bargain." Outside, she found Caleb by the horses, tension in every line of his body. His eyes tracked Marcus like a wolf watching prey. "We're going to the hotel," Clara announced. "I have business to discuss with this gentleman." The hotel was the town's only 2-story building, its rooms small but clean. "Mr." Farworth led them to a corner room, closing the door firmly in Marcus's face when he tried to follow. Once alone, the nervous clerk demeanor vanished. The man straightened, removing his spectacles to reveal sharp blue eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore, I apologize for the deception. I'm actually James Pinkerton, of the Pinkerton Detective Agency." He produced credentials. "We've been hired to investigate certain irregularities in military supply contracts. Your late husband's name features prominently." Clara sank into a chair, mind reeling. "Who hired you?" "The War Department. They've lost nearly $100,000 in diverted supplies and funds. We believe your husband was part of a larger conspiracy." He leaned forward. We also believe you might have information that could help us. What makes you think that? Because someone sent us a letter, anonymous, but clearly written by someone with intimate knowledge of Thomas Whitmore's dealings. The handwriting. He produced a paper from his coat. Matches letters you wrote to your cousin in Philadelphia. Clara recognized her own careful script. The letters she'd posted the day after Thomas died. Insurance against exactly this situation. What do you want from me? The truth. Documents, if you have them. In exchange, we can offer you protection from the Whitmore family and guarantee your safe passage to Wyoming. I have documents. Clara admitted. Hidden in my wagon. But Marcus has 8 men. You're 1 detective. Pinkerton smiled. I have 6 agents in town. Mrs. Whitmore. We've been waiting for you to arrive. He moved to the window, adjusting the curtain in what was clearly a signal. Your Mr. Rowe seems quite capable as well. Former cavalry. Yes. Good. We'll need fighters if Marcus decides to resist. He turned back to her. Are you willing to testify? It could be dangerous. Clara thought of Thomas's cruelty, of all the soldiers who died because their supplies went to line corrupt pockets. Yes, but I want guarantees, written ones. And I want Caleb, Mr. Rowe, included in any protection you offer. Done. Pinkerton extended his hand. Shall we spring the trap? They descended to find Marcus pacing the lobby like a caged animal. His men had gathered, sensing trouble. Caleb stood near the door, deceptively casual but ready for violence. Finally, Marcus snarled. What's this about an inheritance? There is no inheritance, Clara said calmly. Mr. Pinkerton is a federal agent investigating Thomas's crimes. I've agreed to cooperate. Marcus's face went white, then red. You treacherous. Careful, Pinkerton interrupted. My men are already in position. You can come quietly for questioning, or we can do this the hard way. Through the windows, Clara saw armed men emerging from strategic positions. Marcus's men looked around nervously, calculating odds. You have no authority here, Marcus blustered. Federal warrant says otherwise. Pinkerton produced the document. For conspiracy to defraud the United States government. Your name is on it, Mr. Whitmore, along with several of your associates. One of Marcus's men went for his gun. Caleb's cleared leather faster. The crack of his shot followed immediately by others. The hotel lobby erupted in chaos gunfire, shouts, the crash of furniture. Clara dropped behind the desk as bullets shattered the windows above her head. It was over in seconds. 3 of Marcus's men were down, the rest throwing up their hands in surrender. Marcus himself stood frozen. Caleb's gun pressed against his temple. I believe the lady told you no, Caleb said quietly. You should have listened. Pinkerton's agents efficiently secured the survivors. As they led Marcus away, he turned back to Clara, hatred burning in his eyes. This isn't over, he spat. You're still a murderer. Everyone knows what you did to my brother. Your brother died as he lived. Clara replied steadily, violently and by his own actions. The only difference is, this time his victim survived. That night, they camped outside town with Pinkerton's agents as protection. Clara had turned over the hidden documents, detailed records of Thomas's schemes that she'd painstakingly copied and concealed. Tomorrow, the agents would escort them safely to the border of Wyoming territory before turning back with their prisoners. Caleb found her by the fire, staring into the flames. You all right? I think so. She leaned into him as he sat beside her. It's strange. I've been running from them for so long. I hardly know what to do now that it's over. It's not over. You still have land to claim. A trading post to build. He kissed her temple. A life to live without looking over your shoulder. We have a life to build, she corrected. You're still staying? Woman, after what I've seen you do these past weeks, wouldn't miss it for the world. His arms came around her. Besides, someone needs to teach you to shoot straight. She laughed, the sound free and light. I hit that man in the hotel. You shot the chandelier. He just happened to be under it when it fell. It still counts. They bickered playfully as the fire burned low, Around them, the agents kept watch, but for the first time since leaving Dust Creek, Clara felt truly safe. Not because of the armed men or the promise of federal protection, but because the shadow of Thomas and his family no longer loomed over her future. "Caleb," she said softly. That first day, when you agreed to take this job, did you know who I was? What people said about me?" He was quiet for a moment. "I knew. Didn't care then. Don't care now." "Why?" "Because I've seen enough killing to know the difference between murder and survival. And because—" He pulled her closer. "The first time I saw you, you were standing straight and proud despite everyone trying to make you small. Figured anyone that strong deserved a chance to prove them wrong." Clara turned in his arms to kiss him, pouring all her gratitude and growing love into the gesture. When they parted, she whispered, "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for being worth believing in." Tomorrow, they would cross into Wyoming territory. In a week, they'd reach her land. The journey that had started as an escape had become something else entirely, a pilgrimage toward a new life, a second chance for two souls who'd thought themselves beyond redemption. As sleep finally claimed her, safe in Caleb's arms. Clara thought she could already see it, the trading post by the river, travelers stopping to rest and resupply, children playing in the yard while she and Caleb grew old together. A dream worth every dangerous mile, every hard-won battle. A dream finally within reach. The Sweetwater River curved through the valley like a silver ribbon, exactly as the land deed had described. Clara stood on the slight rise overlooking her 60 acres, hardly able to believe they'd finally arrived. The partial cabin sat near a grove of cottonwoods, its log walls sturdy despite years of abandonment. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already white with early snow. "It's perfect," she breathed. Caleb dismounted beside her, studying the terrain with a practical eye. Good water access, natural windbreak from those trees, decent grazing for horses. He pointed toward the road that passed a quarter-mile away. "Close enough to catch traveler traffic, far enough for privacy. You sound like you're planning to stay," Clara said, hope threading through her voice. He pulled her against him, kissing her temple. "Told you I would. Question is, where do we start?" They spent the rest of the day exploring the property. The cabin needed work. New chinking between logs, repairs to the roof, a proper door. But the bones were solid. A small barn stood nearby, suitable for horses and supply storage. The previous owner had even started a vegetable garden, now overgrown but salvageable. That night, they slept in the cabin for the first time. Wind whistled through gaps in the walls, and Clara could see stars through holes in the roof. But she'd never felt more at home. "Tomorrow we go to town," she said, planning aloud. "File the deed transfer, buy supplies, maybe hire some help for the heavy work." "About that." Caleb shifted beside her. "Town's going to want to know who I am, what I am to you." Clara considered. They'd been traveling as employer and guide, but that fiction wouldn't hold in a community where they'd be living. "What do you want to be?" "Your husband, eventually. If you'll have me." Her heart skipped. "Are you proposing Caleb Rowe?" "Poorly, apparently." He turned to face her in the darkness. "I don't have much to offer. No family money, no fine house. Just these two hands and a promise to stand beside you, whatever comes." "Yes," Clara said simply. "Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Though perhaps we should wait until the roof doesn't leak." He laughed, pulling her close. "Practical woman. One of the things I love about you." It was the first time either had used the word love. Clara treasured it, holding it close like a warming fire against the cold. The next morning, they rode into the settlement of Sweetwater Springs. It was larger than Clara had expected. 2 streets of businesses, a church, schoolhouse, and perhaps 50 homes scattered along the river. People watched with open curiosity as they tied up outside the land office. The clerk, a thin man named Josiah Hayes, reviewed Clara's documents carefully. "Everything appears in order. Mrs. Whitmore, though I should mention, there's been some dispute about this parcel." Clara's stomach dropped. What kind of dispute? The previous owner, Mr. Garrett, had some debts. Local rancher named Wade Sullivan claims he's owed money, wants a lien on the property. Whoa, the deed is clear, Caleb said firmly. Bought and paid for. Hayes nodded. Legally, yes, but Sullivan's influential, owns the biggest spread in the valley. Not a man to cross lightly. We're not looking for trouble, Clara said. Just want to build a trading post and live quietly. Trading post? Hayes brightened. That'd be good for the town. We're right on the emigrant trail, but don't have much in the way of supplies. He stamped the documents. I'll file these today. And Mrs. Whitmore, welcome to Sweetwater Springs. They spent the day purchasing supplies and introducing themselves to local merchants. The reception was mixed. Some welcomed the idea of a trading post, while others seemed to reserve judgment. Clara noticed whispers following them, but after Dust Creek, it felt almost mild. At the general store, they met Sarah Morrison, the proprietor's wife. She was a cheerful woman in her 40s, with graying hair and kind eyes. A trading post? How wonderful, she exclaimed. My husband will be relieved. We can barely keep up with demand during peak travel season. She studied Clara shrewdly. You'll need help getting established. I know some good men looking for work. That would be appreciated. Clara said warmly, And you'll join us for church Sunday? Good way to meet everyone. Clara hesitated. Church meant scrutiny, questions about her past, but it also meant community acceptance. We'd be honored. As they loaded supplies, a shadow fell across the wagon. Clara looked up to find a large man on horseback, flanked by 2 ranch hands. Everything about him spoke of power and wealth, from his fine clothes to the expensive silver on his saddle. You'd be the widow taking over the Garrett place, he said without preamble. I'm Clara Whitmore. Yes, and you are Wade Sullivan. He didn't dismount, forcing them to look up at him. Heard you plan to build a trading post. That's right. Might be we could work out a partnership. I supply goods, you sell them, split the profits. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Sullivan, but I have my own suppliers arranged. His eyes hardened. You might find it difficult to succeed here without local support. Caleb stepped forward. The lady said no thank you. Sullivan's gaze shifted to him dismissively. And you are the man who'll be helping Mrs. Whitmore build her business. Is that all? Sullivan's smile was unpleasant. Well, Mrs. Whitmore, my offer stands. Think it over. Be a shame if something happened to delay your plans. He rode off without waiting for a response. Sarah Morrison hurried over, having watched from the store. Don't mind him, she said, though her expression was worried. Wade thinks he owns the whole valley. Gets his nose bent when people don't jump at his commands. Is he dangerous? Clara asked. Not violent, usually, but he has ways of making life difficult. Just be careful. They returned to the cabin soberly. Caleb immediately began checking the property's defensive positions, old habits surfacing. We could have trouble, he said. I know. Clara unpacked supplies with determined efficiency. But I'm not running again. Not from Sullivan. Not from anyone. Never said you should. Just means we need to be ready. Over the next week, they threw themselves into repairs. Sarah Morrison was true to her word, sending 3 men to help, 2 brothers named Jim and Pete Walker, and an older carpenter called Swedish Lars. They were good workers, asking few questions and treating Clara with respect. The cabin transformed rapidly. New chinking sealed the walls. Fresh shakes patched the roof, and a solid door hung in the frame. Lars proved talented at furniture making, crafting sturdy tables and shelves from local timber. You have a gift, Clara told him as he finished a particularly fine counter for the store area. He blushed. My father was a cabinet maker in Stockholm. Taught me before I came to America. Sunday arrived with autumn crispness in the air. Clara dressed carefully in her best remaining dress, dark blue rather than black. a deliberate choice. Caleb wore his cleanest clothes, though he looked uncomfortable. Haven't been to church since before the war, he admitted as they rode toward town. We don't have to go. Yes, we do. You're right about needing the community. He managed a wry smile. Just don't expect me to sing. The small white church was nearly full when they arrived. Conversations paused as they entered, all eyes turning to assess the newcomers. Clara kept her chin high, following Sarah Morrison to a pew near the middle. Reverend Paul Daniels was a young man, earnest and sincere. His sermon focused on redemption and new beginnings, themes that felt particularly pointed. Clara found comfort in the familiar rhythms of the service, the sense of belonging to something larger than herself. After the service, people gathered outside. Some introduced themselves warmly. The blacksmith and his wife, the school teacher, several farming families. Others held back, watchful. Wade Sullivan stood with a group near the cemetery gate, his presence a dark cloud. Mrs. Whitmore? A small woman approached hesitantly. I'm Mary Garrett. My husband built your cabin. Clara's heart went out to the young widow. Mrs. Garrett, I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you. Mary glanced nervously at Sullivan. I wanted to warn you. Wade's claiming my husband owed him money. But it's not true. He's just angry because my husband wouldn't sell to him. I appreciate you telling me. Mary leaned closer. There are papers, proof that the debts were paid, hidden in the cabin. Unless... She paled. Oh no, you haven't torn anything out? No, we've only added where. The hearthstone. It's loose on the left side. Before Clara could respond, Sullivan approached. Mrs. Garrett. Didn't expect to see you here. Mary shrank back. I was just leaving. Don't run off. I'm sure Mrs. Whitmore would love to hear how your husband conducted business. His smile was predatory. All those promises he couldn't keep. That's enough, Caleb said quietly. Sullivan ignored him. Did she tell you about the gambling debts? The loans? She told me the truth. Clara said, which seems to be in short supply around you. Mr. Sullivan. The crowd around them stilled. Challenging Sullivan publicly was clearly not done. His face darkened. You should be careful. Mrs. Whitmore, this isn't some eastern city where law protects you. Out here, we make our own justice. Is that a threat? Just friendly advice? Reverend Daniels stepped between them. Perhaps we could all benefit from remembering this morning's sermon on forgiveness? Sullivan tipped his hat mockingly. Of course, Reverend. I'll pray for Mrs. Whitmore's success. He walked away, his men following. The ride home was tense. As soon as they arrived, Caleb went straight to the hearth. Sure enough, the left stone lifted to reveal an oilskin packet. Inside were receipts, all signed by Sullivan, showing debts paid in full. Also a letter in Garrett's hand. If something happens to me, know that Wade Sullivan is a liar and thief. These papers prove it. He killed him, Clara said quietly. Or had him killed. Maybe. Can't prove it. Caleb studied the papers. But this proves Sullivan has no claim on your land. Our land, Clara corrected. And yes, it does. That night, they sat before the fire planning. The trading post would open within the month. They had supplies ordered, shelves built, living quarters separated from the store area. Despite Sullivan's threats, or perhaps because of them, Clara felt more determined than ever. I love this place already, she said, leaning against Caleb's shoulder. The mountains, the river, the possibility of it all. Even with Sullivan breathing down our necks? We've faced worse and survived. She turned to kiss him. Besides, I have you. That makes me braver than I probably should be. He caught her face gently. You're the bravest person I know. Clara, with or without me. They made love slowly before the fire, christening their new home properly. Afterward, wrapped in blankets and each other, Clara felt a deep peace settle over her. This was home, this man, this place. this life they were building together. Tomorrow there would be more work, more challenges. Sullivan wouldn't give up easily. Winter was coming. The trading post still needed countless things before it could open. But tonight, safe in the arms of the man she loved, in the home they'd claimed together, Clara Whitmore allowed herself to believe in happiness. The dangerous widow of Dust Creek was gone. In her place stood a woman reborn, ready to face whatever the frontier might bring. Spring arrived slowly in the valley, melting snow feeding the Sweetwater until it ran full and fast. Clara's trading post had survived its first winter, and with the emigrant season approaching, she spent every daylight hour preparing. The main room gleamed with well-stocked shelves, everything from flour and beans to ammunition and wheel grease. A small dining area occupied one corner where travelers could buy hot meals. "Looking good," Caleb said, carrying in another crate of goods from their latest supply run. "Should be ready when the first wagons come through." Clara surveyed their work with satisfaction. The confrontation with Sullivan at the church had led to a cold war of sorts. He'd tried various tactics to undermine them, spreading rumors, attempting to intercept their supply wagons, even sending men to dam part of the creek upstream. Each time, they'd persevered, and gradually, the town had begun to rally around them. "Mrs. Clara!" a young voice called from outside. 10-year-old Benjamin Morrison burst through the door, one of several local children who'd taken to visiting the trading post after school. Clara had started keeping penny candy just for such occasions. "What's the excitement, Ben?" "Wagon train coming. Spotted from Harper's Hill. Probably be here by afternoon." Clara's pulse quickened. Their first real test as a trading post. "How many wagons?" 15, maybe 20. "Big one." She pressed a peppermint stick into his hand. "Thanks for the news. Tell your mother I might need extra bread if she has any to spare." As Ben raced off, Caleb caught her hand. "You ready for this?" "I've been ready all winter." She squeezed his fingers. "Have you thought more about what we discussed?" He smiled. "You mean about making an honest woman of you?" "I believe I was the one making an honest man of you." They'd been planning a simple wedding once the trading post was established. Nothing fancy, just Reverend Daniels and a few friends. But Clara wanted it done before the busy season consumed their lives. "Next Sunday," Caleb suggested. "Before the real rush starts?" "Perfect." The wagon train arrived in a cloud of dust and noise. Clara stood on the porch, watching the travelers' faces light up at seeing a well-stocked trading post. Soon the store filled with eager customers, women exclaiming over fabrics and preserved foods, men examining tools and ammunition, children pressing faces against the candy jar. "Lord have mercy, real coffee," one woman exclaimed. "We've been drinking chicory for 2 weeks." Clara moved efficiently through the crowd, filling orders and making change. Caleb helped men with equipment repairs while she handled the store. They worked in smooth partnership, anticipating each other's needs. "You folks planning to stay in business?" asked the wagon master, a grizzled man named Tom Fletcher. "We come through every year, and it'd be good to count on supplies here." "We're here to stay," Clara assured him. "What else do you need that we don't have?" "I'll order it for next time." Fletcher grinned. "Ma'am, you keep this up. You'll have more business than you can handle." By evening, the trading post had nearly sold out of coffee, sugar, and ammunition. The cash box was satisfyingly heavy. Clara served simple meals of stew and cornbread to those who wanted them, the dining area full of tired but grateful travelers. "You done good," Caleb murmured, passing behind her with another pot of coffee. "Natural businesswoman." Through the window, Clara noticed riders approaching, Sullivan and his men. Her good mood evaporated. Sullivan entered without removing his hat, his eyes scanning the successful scene. "Quite the operation, Mrs. Whitmore." "Mr. Sullivan." She kept her voice neutral. "Something I can help you with?" "Just wanted to remind these folks that I run the biggest ranch in the valley. Might be I could offer better prices on beef supplies." Tom Fletcher looked between them, sensing tension. "We're satisfied with Mrs. Whitmore's prices. Thanks." Sullivan's face darkened. "That's so. Well, Travelers should know what kind of person they're dealing with. The widow Whitmore has quite a reputation where she comes from." The store went quiet. Clara felt the familiar sick feeling of her past being weaponized against her. "That's enough. Sullivan!" Caleb stepped from behind the counter, hand resting on his gun. But Clara touched his arm, stopping him. She addressed the room directly. "Mr. Sullivan is right. I am a widow. My late husband was a violent man who died as violently as he lived. I came here to start over, to build something good. If anyone has questions about my character, I invite them to judge me by my actions here, not by whispers and rumor." "Here, here!" Sarah Morrison's voice rang out from near the door. She'd arrived with the promised bread, her husband beside her. "Clara Whitmore has been nothing but honest and hard-working since she arrived, which is more than some can say." Several townspeople who'd come to see the wagon train murmured agreement. Mary Garrett spoke up from a corner. "She helped me keep my home when certain people tried to steal it with false debts." Sullivan's face flushed. "You're all fools if you trust her. Mark my words, she'll show her true nature soon enough. The only nature I've seen," Tom Fletcher said firmly, "is a woman running an honest business. Now, if you're not buying anything, I'd appreciate you moving along. My people need supplies." Faced with unified opposition, Sullivan retreated. But his parting look at Clara promised this wasn't over. The rest of the evening passed peacefully. When the last customer left, Clara sank into a chair, exhausted but exhilarated. "You did it," Caleb said, pulling her to her feet for an embrace. Faced him down in front of everyone. "We did it. I couldn't have stood up to him without knowing you were there." He kissed her deeply. "You're stronger than you think, but I'm glad to stand with you. Always." Sunday came bright and clear. Clara wore her best dress, a soft green that brought out her eyes. Sarah Morrison had decorated the church with wildflowers, and most of the town turned out for the simple ceremony. Reverend Daniels beamed as they stood before him. "Dearly beloved, we gather today to witness the union of Clara and Caleb." Clara barely heard the words, lost in Caleb's steady gaze. This man who'd started as her hired protector had become everything: friend, lover, partner, home. When he slipped the simple gold band on her finger, her eyes misted. "I now pronounce you man and wife. Caleb, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was tender, full of promises. The congregation erupted in cheers. Even Swedish Lars was dabbing at his eyes. The reception was held at the trading post, tables set up outside under the cottonwoods. Sarah had organized the women to bring food, and Jim Walker produced a fiddle. As afternoon faded to evening, couples danced on the packed earth, children ran between tables, and laughter filled the air. "Happy?" Caleb asked, spinning Clara in a slow turn. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Mrs. Rowe." He tested the name, smiling. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." Wade Sullivan had not attended, his absence a dark note in otherwise perfect day. But as Clara looked around at their neighbors turned friends, at the business they'd built, at the man she'd married, she realized Sullivan's power was waning. Community support meant everything on the frontier, and they'd earned it through honest work and fair dealing. "Uncle Caleb," Ben Morrison tugged at Caleb's coat. "Will you teach us to shoot tomorrow? You promised." Caleb ruffled the boy's hair. "Did I? Well, if your parents agree." "Hey." Clara watched her husband organize an impromptu shooting lesson plan with several eager boys. The soldier who'd insisted he wasn't meant for settling down had found his place, just as she had. As the party wound down, Mary Garrett approached. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. The papers you found cleared my husband's name. I can move on now." "What will you do?" "My sister in California has invited me to come. I think I'm ready to leave this place." She smiled sadly. "But I'm glad to see someone making good memories here." Later, alone in their bedroom, Clara and Caleb came together with a passion deepened by the commitment they'd made. Their lovemaking was tender and fierce by turns, a celebration of survival and new beginnings. "My wife," Caleb murmured against her skin. wonder in his voice. "My husband," she replied, pulling him closer. They'd come so far from that first meeting in Dust Creek's boarding house, the dangerous widow and the scarred soldier, both convinced they were beyond redemption. Now they lay entwined in their own bed, in their own home, surrounded by a community that had embraced them. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "About the future. The trading post is succeeding. We have friends, a home." She hesitated. "Maybe someday, children?" His hand stilled. "You'd want that, after what happened before." "I think so. With you, yes." She turned to see his face. "Would you?" "I'd want anything that made you happy. And the thought of a little girl with your eyes," he smiled. "Yeah, I'd want that." They talked quietly of dreams and plans until sleep claimed them. Outside, the Sweetwater River ran steadily toward tomorrow, carrying their hopes along its current. The trading post stood ready for the next wave of travelers, the next challenge, the next chapter of their intertwined lives. In the morning, Clara woke to find Caleb already up. Coffee brewing and breakfast started. She wrapped a shawl around her nightgown and joined him, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. "Good morning, Mrs. Rowe." "Good morning, Mr. Rowe." They stood together watching the sun rise over their valley, painting the mountains gold. Whatever came next, Sullivan's schemes, the challenges of business, the uncertainties of frontier life, they would face it together. "No regrets?" Caleb asked. Clara thought of all the pain that had led her here, to this moment, this man, this life. "Not one. This is exactly where I'm meant to be." He turned in her arms to kiss her. "Then let's make it the best life we can." "We already are," she said, and knew it for truth. The summer sun beat down on the Sweetwater Valley trading post as Clara tallied the month's accounts. 2 years had passed since she and Caleb had spoken their vows beneath the cottonwoods, and the business had flourished beyond her wildest dreams. The original cabin had expanded into a proper building with living quarters upstairs and a thriving store below. A new barn housed supplies and provided shelter for travelers' horses. 20 wagons this week alone, she murmured to herself, making notations in her ledger. The emigrant traffic had increased steadily, and word of their fair prices and good treatment had spread along the trail. "Mama! Mama!" A small voice interrupted her calculations. 18-month-old Samuel Rowe toddled into the room, his dark hair so like his father's, sticking up in unruly tufts. Clara scooped him into her arms, marveling as always at this miracle she'd thought she'd never have. "What is it, little man?" "Papa." Samuel pointed outside where Caleb was teaching his weekly shooting class to local boys. The sight never failed to warm Clara's heart. Her taciturn soldier transformed into a patient teacher, showing gangly teenagers how to handle firearms safely. "Yes, that's Papa. He'll be in soon for lunch." The bell above the door chimed, and Sarah Morrison entered with a basket of fresh pies. "These should sell well to the afternoon travelers," she said, then cooed at Samuel. "How's my favorite little merchant?" As Clara settled the pies on the counter, she noticed a cloud of dust approaching from the east. Not a wagon train. The dust was too concentrated. Riders, moving fast. Caleb had seen them too. He dismissed his students quickly and moved to the porch, hand resting casually near his weapon. Some habits from their dangerous early days died hard, but as the riders drew closer, Clara recognized the lead figure and relaxed. James Pinkerton, looking much the same as he had 2 years ago when he'd arrested Marcus Whitmore. "Mrs. Rowe." Pinkerton dismounted, touching his hat. "Mr. Rowe, you're looking well." "Mr. Pinkerton." Clara shifted Samuel to her hip. "What brings you back to Sweetwater Springs?" "Good news. Actually, thought you'd want to hear it in person." He accepted the glass of water Caleb offered. The last of the conspiracy trials concluded. Marcus Whitmore was sentenced to 15 years hard labor. His associates received similar sentences. The corruption ring is completely dismantled. Clara felt a weight she hadn't realized she still carried lift from her shoulders. It's truly over then. Completely. Your testimony was instrumental. Pinkerton smiled. There's more. The government recovered significant assets from the conspirators. As a key witness, you're entitled to a reward, $10,000. Clara nearly dropped Samuel. 10,000. Mr. Pinkerton, I didn't testify for money. Nevertheless, it's yours. Consider it justice, long delayed. He produced an official-looking document. This authorizes the bank in Cheyenne to release the funds to you. After Pinkerton departed, Clara and Caleb sat in stunned silence. $10,000 was a fortune enough to expand the trading post, buy more land, secure their future completely. What should we do with it? Clara asked. Caleb bounced Samuel on his knee. Considering. What do you want to do? I've been thinking about the children in town. We have a school, but it's so small, and some families can't afford supplies. She met his eyes. What if we built a proper schoolhouse, established a fund for children who need help? The Clara Rowe Education Fund. He smiled. I like it. That evening, they called a town meeting. The entire community packed into the trading post as Clara explained their plan. The response was overwhelming. Offers of labor, donated materials, and grateful tears from parents who'd worried about their children's education. Even Wade Sullivan attended, standing in the back with his perpetual scowl. His power had continued to wane as the community prospered without him. Several of his ranch hands had quit to work for fairer employers, and his attempts to undermine the trading post had all failed. This is foolishness, he declared when Clara finished. Wasting money on charity when you could be building your own empire. We are building something, Caleb said calmly. A community where children can learn and families can thrive. That's worth more than any empire. Pretty words from a killer turned shopkeeper. Sullivan sneered. The room tensed, but Caleb simply smiled. I've been both those things and more. Now I'm a husband, father, and teacher. Men can change. Sullivan. Most of them. Anyway. Sullivan stormed out, but his departure barely caused a ripple. The town had moved beyond his influence. Construction on the new schoolhouse began that fall. Clara often brought Samuel to watch the progress, his chubby hands clapping at the activity. The building rose quickly with so many volunteers, and by spring it stood ready 2 rooms, proper desks, and a library started with books Clara ordered from Denver. The dedication ceremony drew people from miles around. Reverend Daniels blessed the building while children peered through windows at their future classroom. The current teacher, Miss Patterson, wept openly at the resources now available to her. Speech! Speech! The crowd called to Clara. She stood before them, Samuel on her hip and Caleb's steadying hand on her back. When I came to this valley, I was running from a dark past. You gave me a chance to build something better. This school is my thank you, our thank you, for welcoming 2 broken strangers and helping us become whole. The applause was thunderous. Later, as families toured the building, Ben Morrison, now 13 and one of Caleb's star pupils, approached them. Mrs. Clara, Mr. Caleb, I wanted to say, well, thank you. Not just for the school, for everything. For showing us that people can start over. That night, after Samuel was asleep, Clara and Caleb sat on their porch watching the stars. The trading post hummed with quiet prosperity, guests in the newly added rooms, supplies ready for tomorrow's travelers. Did you ever imagine this? Clara asked. When you took that job from a desperate widow in Dust Creek? No, Caleb admitted. I thought I was just earning travel money. Never imagined I'd find home. He pulled her closer. Never imagined I'd find you. We found each other, and look what we built from that finding. A year later, Clara stood in the same spot, but now with 2-year-old Samuel and newborn Anna in her arms. The trading post had become the unofficial heart of Sweetwater Springs. Travelers planned their routes to stop there, knowing they'd find fair prices, good food, and honest dealing. Wade Sullivan had sold his ranch and moved to California. his empire crumbling as the community thrived without him. His former lands were divided among several families, creating a more balanced, prosperous valley. "Letter for you, Mrs. Rowe." Young Ben Morrison called, having taken a job helping with the mail delivery. Clara recognized Mary Garrett's handwriting immediately. Her friend wrote regularly from California, where she'd remarried and started a new family. This letter contained special news. She was coming to visit, wanting her children to see where their journey to happiness had begun. "Good news?" Caleb asked, returning from the stable where he'd been helping a traveler repair a wagon wheel. "The best. Mary's coming to visit. She wants to see how the story continued after she left. It continued pretty well, I'd say." He kissed her forehead, then each child's, better than either of us had any right to expect. That evening, the trading post filled with its usual mix of travelers and townspeople. Clara moved between them all, serving food, finding supplies, listening to stories. She caught her reflection in the window and barely recognized the frightened widow who'd stepped off that stagecoach in Dust Creek 4 years ago. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, happier, whole. The scars remained, they always would, but they no longer defined her. Now she was Clara Rowe, wife, mother, businesswoman, pillar of the community. She'd traveled thousands of miles and through darkness deeper than any prairie night to reach this place of light and purpose. "Mama, story?" Samuel tugged at her skirt. "In a moment, sweetheart." She finished serving a customer, then gathered both children close. "What story would you like?" "The journey story." Clara smiled. It was his favorite, the tale of how Mama and Papa met, their dangerous journey west, and the home they built together, a story of second chances and courage rewarded, of love found in unexpected places. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a woman who thought her story was over." Caleb joined them, adding his own embellishments to the familiar tale. Around them, the trading post buzzed with life and promise. Through the window, the Sweetwater River flowed steadily on, carrying their dreams toward tomorrow. The dangerous widow and the scarred soldier had found their happily ever after, not in fairy tale perfection, but in the daily choice to build something good together. And in the end, that was the greatest adventure of all. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West, where love bloomed between a widow seeking redemption and a soldier searching for peace. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this story from, whether you're listening during your commute, relaxing at home, or perhaps even camping under the stars like our pioneers once did. Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of courage, romance, and adventure from America's frontier days. And share your thoughts about Clara and Caleb's journey in the comments below. Until next time, partners.